Picture this, all right? It's a random Tuesday night, you're sitting on the couch, maybe watching TV, and you open your banking app just to do a quick balance check. And suddenly your stomach kind of drops because the number looking back at you is way, way lower than you expected. So what do? You start scrolling through the recent transactions, right? And it's just stuff. $12 for a quick lunch, $18 for some takeout on Friday, a $7 coffee here, a $25 Amazon purchase you honestly barely even remember making, and you're just sitting there staring at your phone thinking, wait a minute, where did all my money actually go? I mean, you didn't buy anything crazy. There's no new luxury watch on your wrist. You didn't book some lavish European vacation. You didn't go on a massive weekend shopping spree. It's just normal, everyday, boring stuff. Yet somehow, your hard-earned cash is simply vanishing into thin air. Listen, if that exact scenario sounds incredibly familiar to you, take a deep breath because you are absolutely not alone. Practically everyone goes through this. Today in this explainer, we are going to take a massive deep dive. We're going to break down the exact step-by-step mechanics of how true wealth is actually built, phase by phase. And, more importantly, we're going to expose why the default financial systems most people use on a daily basis are frankly practically designed to keep them broke. So let's put this invisible drain into some real perspective because the numbers are staggering. The average household unknowingly spends over $3,400 a year just on dining out. Think about that for a second. That is almost $10 a day, every single day, completely leaking out of the system. $3,400. That's a reliable used car. That's a mind-blowing vacation. That's a massive chunk of a down payment. Just gone. And look, most people assume their spending problem is a moral failing, right? They think it's a lack of discipline. They tell themselves, I just need more self-control. I need to be better. But the reality is actually quite different. The way our traditional bank accounts are set up makes it almost mathematically and psychologically impossible to control spending. Our brains are simply not wired to mentally calculate all our upcoming fixed costs, rent, electricity, insurance, against a single checking account balance in real time. We log in, we see a relatively big number, and we immediately experience what behavioral economists call frictionless spending. There's no barrier, there's no warning light. And that fundamental flaw sets the perfect stage for why we desperately need a brand new system.
So, welcome to our roadmap for getting out of that trap. Today, we are walking through something I call the milestone ladder. We are going to completely demystify the whole concept of wealth building by stripping away the jargon and breaking it down into achievable, highly mathematical phases. We're talking the whole journey, from absolute zero, having nothing in the bank, all the way up to complete financial freedom. We are going to look closely at the exact dollar amounts where the rules of the game fundamentally shift. Because here's the secret: wealth does not grow in a straight, predictable line. It's not a steady slope. It grows in distinct, highly predictable stages. And if you know what stage you're in, you know exactly what to focus on.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the psychology of saving.
Okay, so the very first major hurdle in your financial journey, honestly, has almost nothing to do with math and absolutely everything to do with mental accounting. Let me explain. If all your money sits in one giant pool, one standard checking account, your brain naturally treats it like one giant pile of spending money. It's human nature. To fix this, you have to fundamentally change your environment, and we do that with the two-account system. It is incredibly simple, but it's a total game changer. Account number 1 is your bills account. Your paycheck lands here, and the exact amount needed for your absolute survival, your rent, your car insurance, your phone bill, your utilities, stays right here. But here's the catch. No debit card in your wallet for this account. No Apple Pay linked to it. No impulse buys. It is a fortress. Then account number 2 is your spending account. You transfer a set amount into this one every week. This is your guilt-free, highly flexible money for groceries, eating out, having a few drinks, entertainment. By physically separating your money into two different spaces, you are essentially moving the candy bowl off your desk and putting it in another room. You add friction. When your spending account shows a limit, your brain stops guessing. You don't have to wonder if buying that coffee means you can't pay the electric bill next week. The math is already done for you.
Now, if you are literally starting from zero, the traditional financial advice is usually something overwhelming like save 20% of your income, which, let's be honest, completely overloads your brain. It feels impossible, so you don't even try. Instead, we use something called the $10 habit. Starting with just $10 isn't about the math at all. $10 isn't going to make you rich. But it is entirely about rewiring your psychological identity. When you start successfully putting away just $10 a week, you start to build a tiny, tiny emergency buffer. But way more importantly than the money, you prove to yourself that you can actually do it. You literally stop telling yourself that toxic story that you are just bad with money. You start shifting your identity from a spender to a saver.
You stop fighting your own self-image and you finally start building a rock-solid foundation. It's about building the muscle before you try to lift the heavy weights.
And once that saving habit really forms and becomes automatic, you are aiming for a very first major milestone on the ladder, $10,000. Now, why 10,000? Well, when you hit this specific number, a profound psychological transformation actually happens inside your brain. Neuroscientists have actually looked at this and found that having liquid financial security at this specific level noticeably reduces your cortisol levels, which is your body's primary stress hormone. Think about it. With 10 grand in the bank, a broken laptop or a sudden car repair or a medical bill is no longer an existential catastrophe. It doesn't ruin your life. It's just an inconvenience. You write a check and you move on. At this milestone, you officially shift from playing constant, exhausting financial defense to finally playing offense. You suddenly have the breathing room to negotiate a raise at work without the fear of getting fired. You can take a calculated risk on a side hustle, or honestly, you can just simply sleep deeply through the night for the first time in years.
Which brings us to our next major hurdle. Section 2, Surviving Phase 1. So crossing that first $10,000 milestone brings us into what is undeniably the most frustrating stretch of the entire wealth-building journey. It's a period where your progress feels completely invisible. We call this Phase 1. In Phase 1, you are the manual engine. You are providing all the combustion. You are pushing the boulder up the hill all by yourself. The actual growth from your investments, the interest or the market returns, is so incredibly small that it falls way below your brain's perceptual threshold. You look at your account and it feels like it's just not working. It feels broken. But in Phase 2, which comes later, compounding becomes the engine. Your money's returns wake up and take over the heavy lifting. The brutal reality, though, you have to grind and survive Phase 1 to ever get the luxury of experiencing Phase 2.
Let's really look at this math, because seeing it makes all the difference. Imagine you invest $400 a month at an average historical 8% return. After 10 agonizing years of discipline, you have about $73,000. It's okay, but for a whole decade of work, it feels a little underwhelming, right? But look at what happens at year 30. You have nearly $600,000. The time frame is the same 10-year blocks, the 8% rate stays exactly the same, your $400 contribution stays exactly the same, but the output absolutely explodes in the later decades. This is why in those early years, your personal discipline simply has to carry all the weight because the math of compounding is still just warming up. And because that math warms up so painfully slowly, so many people fall headfirst into what we call the Phase 1 trap. Here's how it happens. You look at your totally underwhelming balance after 3 years, and you incorrectly diagnose the problem. You think to yourself, man, my return rate is just too low. 8% is too slow. So what do? You sell your incredibly reliable, boring index funds, and you start chasing some hot biotech stock you heard about it at a dinner party, or some crazy new crypto token, desperately trying to double your money overnight. Listen to me, that is the single most expensive mistake an early investor can possibly make. You are treating a low contribution problem as a low return problem. Let me say that again. You're treating a low contribution problem as a low return problem. In Phase 1, your return rate barely even matters. The absolute only lever that truly moves your outcome in the beginning is simply figuring out how to increase your manual monthly deposit. That's it.
Now, if you can keep your head down, avoid that trap, and just keep shoveling fuel into the engine month after month, you eventually hit the magical crossover point, $100,000. This is huge. This is a massive celebration point. Before we explain exactly why this is considered the absolute holy grail of early investing, if you are finding this deep dive breakdown valuable and you want to truly master your financial journey, make sure you hit subscribe to Langford Invests. We put out deep dive analyses just like this to help you win with money. Okay, so at $100,000, the math stops being a boring textbook concept and literally starts becoming a life-rearranging force.
Let's look at exactly how that happens in Section 3, the compounding turbocharger.
This is the phase where the heavy lifting is finally, thankfully, taken off your tired shoulders. Think of compound interest exactly like a car engine's turbocharger. If you're a car person, you know that a turbocharger uses the waste exhaust gases from the engine to spin a turbine, which then compresses clean air to force even more power back into the engine. It's a brilliant feedback loop. The system literally amplifies itself. But here's the key. A turbocharger does not work at low RPMs. It needs enough exhaust pressure built up to actually engage and spool up. In your financial life, crossing that $100,000 mark is the exact RPM threshold where your financial turbocharger finally kicks in. The sheer mass of your money means your return starts cycling back to create more growth in a year than your manual deposits could ever achieve alone.
Let's look at this chart to see this in action. Let's say you are 10 years in and you're contributing $500 a month. So that's a manual effort of $6,000 a year. But because your total overall balance has now crossed that massive six-figure threshold, the market returns on your big pile of money are now generating over $10,000 in a single year. Look at that. Your money's silent, overnight, totally passive earnings are now completely dwarfing your actual physical deposits. Your money is out-earning your manual effort. At this exact moment, you have officially become a minority contributor to your own wealth. Your money works harder than you do.
And once that turbo spools up, that momentum carries you incredibly rapidly to the next big milestone, the $300,000 mark. At this specific milestone, if you look at a graph, the compounding curve stops looking like a gentle slope and bends violently upward. Think about it. It probably took you years of brutal, pinching discipline to reach your first 100,000. But the massive leaps to 200,000 and then to 300,000 happen in a fraction of the time. The momentum becomes almost unstoppable at this point. But beware, because this massive speed also creates a very dangerous psychological illusion where you start feeling invincible. Like you can finally take a break, pull money out, or make wildly risky bets because you're playing with house money.
You absolutely must resist that urge. You have to remember this core principle. The real power of compounding isn't just the growth itself. It's the continuous, uninterrupted nature of that growth. It's the new growth stacking on top of the previous gains over and over and over. At this stage in the game, your only real job as an investor is to basically get out of your own way. You just need to not break the chain with emotional panic selling when there's an inevitable dip in the market. When the news gets scary, sit on your hands. Just let the turbocharger run. Don't tinker with the engine while it's finally doing its job.
All right, we are entering the final and most important phase. Section 4, buying back your freedom.
At this point, we really need to step back and redefine what we are actually trying to achieve with all of this incredible disciplined saving. Because it's not just about achieving some high score on a glowing bank screen, right? That's empty. The magic number for a lot of people to fundamentally alter their lives isn't $2 million or $5 million or $10 million. Honestly, it's the $500,000 mark, $500,000. This is a surprisingly accessible number for middle-class earners that, when it's parked correctly and paired with a very intentional, optimized lifestyle, can literally allow you to escape the rat race entirely. When you hit $500,000, you are holding the master keys to total independence. But, and this is a massive but, you have to profoundly understand the difference in mindset here. The typical consumer brain views a pile of money exactly like a bathtub full of water. When they get a pile of money, they pull the plug, they drain the tub to buy a fleet of supercars, massive oversized houses, designer clothes, and they slowly drain that water level until the tub is completely empty. The investor brain, however, is a completely different species. The investor brain lives strictly off the yield, the interest, the dividends. It only drinks the condensation off the pipes. You never ever touch the principal pile of money. By living purely off the exhaust of the engine, your financial portfolio can actually outlive you, effectively making you financially immortal.
Let's really walk right through this math on the screen so you can see exactly how realistic this is. If you park your $500,000 in relatively safer fixed income assets that are yielding, say, a conservative 5%, that produces $25,000 a year, or roughly $2,080 every single month, completely passive. It just arrives. Now, if you blend in some broad index funds targeting a historical 8.5% return, you are looking at over $42,500 a year. That's over $3,500 dropping right into your lap every single month of your life. If you have engineered a life where your basic needs, maybe you have a paid-off house, you keep reasonable expenses, you enjoy cooking your own meals, if those costs are less than that monthly passive income, guys, you are free. You have won the game. You literally never have to clock into a toxic, soul-crushing job ever again.
And this means we have to fundamentally redefine what the word wealth even means in modern society. Crossing this $500,000 threshold isn't about flexing on social media, it's not about popping bottles in a club, it is entirely about the incredible, quiet power of simply being able to say no. It's about refusing to stay in toxic work environments. It's about having the power to take 6-month-long sabotages to travel the world while your knees still work and you're young enough to enjoy it. It's choosing passion projects over corporate paychecks. You are fundamentally buying back your Monday mornings, your Wednesday afternoons, and asserting total, uncompromised control of your own time. You are finally acting out of purpose, instead of acting out of fear of missing a rent payment.
Because at the end of the day, real wealth is piles of options, not piles of stuff. Think about that for a second.
The person living happily on $3,000 a month with their time entirely their own, waking up without an alarm clock, that person is infinitely freer than the stressed out executive pulling down mid-six figures who's trapped in a miserable 60-hour-a-week job just to pay off a depreciating luxury car and a massive, echoey mortgage. Piles of options. That is what makes this entire journey. The years of budgeting, the brutal discipline, the endless patience in phase one, that is what makes it completely, undeniably worth it.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Time is going to pass regardless of what you do today. A decade from right now is going to arrive whether you prepare for it or not. The question is, will your future self look back from 10 years out, smiling because you set up that 2-account system today? Because you started that tiny $10 habit, built the foundation, and eventually let compounding do its miraculous work? Or will you be looking back 10 years from now, with that same familiar knot in your stomach, staring at a banking app, wishing you had just started your climb today? The choice is entirely yours. Start exactly where you are, build the engine, and let the math set you free.
Thanks for watching. If this gave you a new way to think about your wealth, subscribe to Langford Invests. Leave a comment below with the one savings move you're making this year, and I'll see you in the next one.